Look, I'm going to cut straight to it with this intro. If you're a business owner or someone who works in marketing who's scared about the oncoming march of AI, you need to watch this. Yes, there are things to consider, but there are also opportunities. And I'm not talking about these snake oil sales type, hey, AI bro type opportunities. I'm talking about things that are happening now. Things that are already affecting your business. And I've brought someone very special to help you through this. He's a guy called Michael Buckaby. And this is one of the best episodes we've made. So if you want to know about AI without the BS, if you want to know what you can actually do right now, then watch on. Let's do it. So Michael, I am sick to death of hearing about AI. I think AI is just about kind of all these people like snake oil. Just everyone's calling everything AI. And as a business owner, I've had enough. So I'm going to shut it out and just knuckle down and do the same thing I've always done. Now, Michael, if I really believed that, how much trouble would I be in?
Well, I think you'd be in a lot of trouble. And I think the main reason is it's not me saying this, it's really Google. And, most businesses, they're online, they have a website, and a substantial portion of their traffic, and even more importantly, a substantial portion of their actual revenue comes from search. Google is changing what it means and how to do search in lots of different ways. And that has big impacts for everyone from the smallest company to the biggest.
And if you are working for the smallest company, or probably not the biggest, then this is the episode for you, because we're going to give you 3 things that you really need to pay attention to. So this is for business owners. This is for people who are good at marketing but have got a bit stuck. This is absolutely for anyone who's worried about the changes that not so much are coming, but the changes that are here. And we have 3 things for you to pay attention to. So Michael, what is the first thing that we need to keep focus on?
Yeah, I think the first thing to keep focus on is there's a lot of hype out there. There's a lot of new startups every week. There's like all these new AI models. Forget all of that. Just pretend none of that existed and focus only on Google, which is what SEO and search has been doing for the last 2 decades. If we look only at the changes that Google has done, that is enough for us to start making changes to our own marketing strategy. So they've introduced AI overviews, which is like a summary of the top set of results that come in. They have publicly stated they're going to come out this year with AIO 2.0, which does more reasoning instead of just fact-based responses. And really shortly, like it's already in some of the Android preview builds that have leaked, is AI mode, which is a blurred together version of traditional search, like the box you type in, with just some other tweaks to make it more what you would get out of Google's Gemini product, which is their AI chat.
That's fascinating. It's interesting because it does echo the early days of SEO, where we used to optimize different versions of the websites for different search engines. And sometime around the year 2001, 2002, it became clear that no, keep an eye on Google. That's it. If they still appear to be, if not the best performers in the market, certainly the ones who have the most money to invest in getting it right. So there you go. Number 1. Keep an eye on Google. I like that very much. So what's the second thing that we really need to focus on to make sure we don't miss out here?
Yeah, I think the second thing to focus on is really the shift in content, which is that, to date, the traditional playbook for search has been, you look at where the volume is, where the most search is coming from, and then you try to write content for that. And those are the terms that are most vulnerable to being AIO'd. And if there's an AI overview for a term, it's just automatically right now cutting out half the traffic. I mean, that's a good rule of thumb. And it's getting worse. And if you look at, what is happening in ChatGPT and where people are getting answers from, it is really changing. These are services where people are using them as, a type of therapist. They're using them as a type of business coach. They're doing all sorts of different kinds of queries than they do from traditional search. And that in a lot of ways, they're advice engines and they give much better answers. It's just a whole new ballgame. So we really don't want people to discount them because there is a lot of movement in there. Something to do, a lot of people are very obsessive about their analytics. Where is the traffic coming from? Google vastly overstates their own presence in analytics, because so much of the search is brand search and navigational search, where half of your traffic is for your site's name, not necessarily for the URL. You've already won that. Where you really need to fight is to come down funnel, fight for the commercial terms. And with that, there's a lot more opportunity there.
It's one of the first things we look at with any SEO project. I'm using the say in the UK is the royal we, so everyone in SEO. One of the first things you look at is how much of the traffic going to the website at the moment is, you say, branded, because those people are kind of less interest to us. With, as you just said, you've already won the battle with them.
Yeah.
Where I think AI and the way people search is getting very, very interesting is all the long tail things that we've been hunting down for years and years, the things that go into more depth. I've always found it quite frustrating as somebody in SEO that you're tracking down bits of bad English, bits of bad uses of language, because people don't naturally type long questions into search engines. They'll type things like, what camera water? And you're like, well, what does that mean? And that's a big part of it. So the idea that the language, especially in these large language models, that is much more natural, I think it's going to open up some new opportunities for people to really show their expertise. And this is sort of my opinion, but also what I've learned from speaking to people like you, is that this evolution into the way that search is changing and the way people search is changing is just going to be another step towards the companies and the websites and the organizations who are very good, just them continuing their march forward, and all the people trying to fool search engines or AI or whatever are just going to fall further behind. So I've been telling people for 25 years to fight the good fight, and I think this is going to be proof that it's been really worth it.
Oh, absolutely. Something I'm very excited about with all these changes is that there has definitely been an over optimization for SEO type articles that are not fun to write. They're not fun to read. They're not interesting. They're made for this toddler brain of Google traditional search ranking, where, even if you're an expert on a topic, you can't start off at the expert level with the article. You have to start off with like, what is the XYZ? Like the most basic explanation of it, just to get a little bit of Google magic on it. And that's really changing. So we are definitely seeing those type of articles are not worth fighting over. And it's the more complex, the more point of view driven, the more, brand voice articles that are standing out in marketing. Something, I think SEO has been very siloed. And I think that's changing, where moving forward, we have to be a little smarter, a little more cross-functional, and a little better about, making content that works not just for search, but for social, that can be used for support or sales if you're in B2B. And that, is something that people actually want to read. Which feels like a low bar, but it's not always crossed.
And hallelujah for that. Reading one of it might be Marie Hayes, who's somebody who writes an absolutely fantastic.
Oh yeah, she's great.
Paid for. You're the first person I've spoken to who's heard of her. I sort of discovered her, like, wow, this is amazing. But I think it was in her last issue where she was saying that Google are admitting themselves that the way search digests information is changing, and it's going to weed out some of the things that I think have frustrated normal people over the years. Like, it's almost become a meme that people say, oh, I just want to search for a recipe for meatballs, and the website I land on, the article starts by going, I remember the first time I saw a meatball, it was 1923 and I was wearing an onion on my back. Going off onto a Simpsons thing there, but writing 2,000 words and then having the meatball recipe at the bottom, and people have said, oh, why do people do that? And it's always been because they're optimizing for Google rather than for humans, because quite frankly, that's what you had to do. And there's some evidence now that, say, Google are saying this as well, but it's been backed up by people actually. I love all the people who prod Google and go, is that really what's happening?
Yeah.
And they're starting to search, rankings, put it this way, rankings are starting to favor articles that get to the point straight away. So the payload is all in the first paragraph or two, And then they can waffle on about what happened in 1923 and
Yeah.
the first time they saw a meatball and whatever, because contextually there's still a certain level of entertainment value for that. But I think that's one of the most positive changes I've heard from Google in a while. Stop padding. Stop adding all this superfluous junk and just get to the point, because ultimately that's what, for the foreseeable future, chat AIs are going to do. And that's why people are turning to them, because they don't want to read all this stuff about, well, junk.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite things, this is a very personal bugbear, but in recipes, I hate how the item quantities and the listing of them is separate from the directions. They'll say like, hey, you know, you need 5 eggs for this recipe. And then later on in the directions, like whisk the eggs. It doesn't say whisk the 5 eggs together. You can just tell ChatGPT to, like, when you list out the recipe, to do that. And it is so helpful.
I've done it. We're going to go off on a bit of a side quest for a minute or two here, but it's fun. I just had seitan for lunch. Obviously, I'm in the UK, you're in the States, we're way ahead. And a friend of mine wrote a very rambling email about how to make seitan and his personal preferences. It literally was just an email. So I just chucked it in GPT and said, can you turn this into a usable recipe? Punk. There we go.
Yeah.
I use it all the time. But
well, and I think this is, you said this is a side quest. I think it might be more central than you think.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is what we just described are things that you're never going to get from a traditional search page, and they are qualitatively better. Like we talk a lot about as SEOs, we talk about search experience. Like, what's the search experience for this? It is just impossible to beat this, like, ability to just rework the stuff or to tell it commands and have it shift around. And, we need to figure out a way, as people that are marketing our businesses and, our organizations, we need to figure out a way to go beyond those sort of shallow search queries and to start thinking more about task intent than search intent. We need to think about, like, what are people really trying to accomplish, and build content for that more than, again, these shallow sort of fact-based queries.
I'm looking forward to it. I think it's only going to get better. One of the things that I think we're talking about the nature of search, but I think the nature of digesting results is going to significantly change soon as well. So we're already starting to see lots of people in marketing getting very excited about the phrase hyper personalization. And I think AI, if it can be done in a non-creepy way, will be able to make significant changes to websites that make them a far nicer user experience. To come up with a... Go on.
No. I'm trying to keep us on track, but I was going to ask,
Thank you.
Have you looked at any of, like, the deep research tools?
Not really. We're always on the bleeding edge of this stuff, so I never would pretend to know everything. And I've said to GPT, do deep research, but in terms of there being specific deep research tools, this is something I'm only really learning about in about the last week. So do go on.
So I think the easiest way to think about it, especially from the SEO perspective, is that it's almost as if the AI is doing the Googling for you. And so these are particular research tools that do a first pass of a whole bunch of different related searches to your task that you give it, then collates and summarizes the information. And confusingly, they're all named deep research, deep seek, kind of thing. So, but Google, OpenAI, Perplexity all have shipping products of this. And it does really kind of call in the nature of, like, what it means to do a search. Here's an example. We're doing a podcast. I'm trying to talk to more people on podcasts. I did a query that's impossible to do in traditional search, which is, hey, I would like to know podcasts that are about SEO and marketing that have been updated in the last 3 months. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no good way to put that into Google, but I put that into Google's deep research tool. It went out and did 100 different queries of different sites, different podcasts, pulled all that information in, did a big collation of it, gave me a tabulated list of the podcasts that I then clicked a button, and it was a Google sheet that I could work through.
I'd love
That's
to say,
real
and
different.
you found us.
I, I think I found you through
That's,
Podmatch,
yeah, we found each other on Podmatch, didn't we?
which is a whole other thing. But again, there's a level, like it did 100 searches. Does that count for search volume? Like, does
Core.
that count as visits to those sites? Does that count as any interaction at all? And I think we're going to see more and more of a remove from that, where we just ask the AI, like, hey, do a first pass at this. Where, as internet people, we have gotten so good at, like, I have a problem. And then in your mind, you don't even realize you do it. You abstract out, well, I need to search for this particular aspect of it. And then you do some search thing, you get some results, and then you synthesize those and you bring them back. And I don't think we realize what a mental load that is, what a time load that is. And I think that's just going to start to evaporate as something we need to do. And more of it's going to be handled for us for good and bad.
For good and bad. Going back to the sort of the main focus of this conversation, Business Amplifier podcast is very much for business owners and
Yeah.
people who have marketing responsibility, who want to stay ahead of the competition, because a lot of it is still the race. It's still the same thing it's been for 25 years. You don't have to be the best, but you have to be a little bit better. There's some fable about running away from bears, and I can't remember what the details are now.
Yeah, I'm sure it was one of my dad's favorite jokes, which is that, the two guys are out camping and the ranger says, oh, you never should run away from a bear. And the one guy, when they see the bear, he starts putting on his shoes, and the other guy says, you can't run away from him. He's like, I don't have to outrun the bear. I have to outrun you. So,
Exactly.
so, and I think this is an interesting thing for people that are SEOs. Something I've had to say a lot is Google's problems are not your problems. Like, Google's doing a bunch of different stuff now because I think they feel very threatened by the chat GPTs and the rise of these other search things. And to their credit, they're taking it seriously and making these changes. We just need to outcompete our competitors we were working against to start with. How I recommend doing that is, some basic stuff. And this is all things that people listening to this, you can just go do right now. One is check if the different AI search tools can actually reach your site. We all, we're very familiar with the concept of Googlebot. It has to read through your site so it knows what's on it, so then it can show it in search results. It's the same with AI. There's no reason to handicap it. You don't have to put everything out there, but be deliberate. Like, you should definitely have, like, your business information out there, what it is you do, what problems you solve, what your hours are, where you operate. Something that comes up a lot in conversations is, hey, ChatGPT is now like our most popular and least well-trained business representative.
Yeah,
And,
what a phrase.
yeah, like, who knows what it's saying about your company, but these are money questions that people are asking. Like, hey, in the US, there's a big thing with healthcare information. Like, is this company HIPAA compliant? Like, and if ChatGPT says, oh no, this email provider isn't compliant, people will just write it off the list. Like, oh, I'm not even going to investigate them. So that's real big. I think the other thing people should do is they should start thinking more about brand statement content, which is just like, hey, I'm going to write about why we are the best, and it doesn't have to be in like a weird, overly salesy way, but we're still coming into 2025 here. It's still appropriate to be like, hey, our customers in 2024, they chose us for these 5 reasons. Like, that's content that's great for social. That's content that's great for down funnel returns in the AI search, and it's something that is just generally useful for your company.
It is, and it shows personality. It will help you stand out. This phrase is going to keep popping up about the age of authenticity, and again, I think it's a really good thing.
Yeah. And, the last thing I want to say about this is that I think, in the vein of, cross-functional marketing, it is very important to have, I call it face content, that you have face content that comes with, that you can imagine a person speaking about this thing and you hear their voice when you do it. And then there's all the AI content. And if you aren't deliberately thinking about, oh, when I put this piece out there, which is this, there's going to be problems, because it's just going to be pulled into the AI. You'll get no credit for it and nothing great. But if you do have the point of view, people will seek it out, and I think you'll win more business, and I think you'll do better in the long term.
Do you know what? You've kind of answered number 3. So let's go back to the 3 points that we've loosely hung this conversation on. The first things that you've got to focus on is the fact that Google are making changes, and they're the ones to keep an eye on. Number 2, we talked about how the nature of search is changing. And number 3, we were going to talk about opportunity. And I think you've hit on that already, but I'm going to say, go on.
I segued too hard into it. So
it's good. It's fun.
Yeah. No. Well, so I think that was sort of what you should do. And I think that's true. On my site, we wrote a framework for this, which is very practical, and it's not vendor based. It's just things you can do, called the Biscuit Framework. I'd recommend people do. But the reason why to do this and the reason why to focus on AI search is that there is opportunity right now, because what AI search surfaces and what it recommends is different than traditional search. And we have definitely seen like challenger brands, smaller companies that are more niche, that don't have giant content teams, start to win those commercially relevant searches in a way that they haven't been able to win in traditional search, for all of the bad reasons of SEO, where, Forbes is doing weird parasite SEO and crowding out other terms, and there's all this other bad stuff in general that isn't helpful to people, and it's not good for sites. And, would at least recommend, even if you're not going to go crazy with this, there's a lot of reasonable things you can do today to set yourself up for the next couple of years of search and the changes.
Excellent. We're going to link to the Biscuit Framework in the show notes for this. So it's something I very much recommend anyone listening to this who runs a business or just wants to learn more goes and has a look at, because, Michael, you and your team you've done the difficult bit. You've done the kind of, you answer the question of, what do we do? And the answer is more good stuff. Carry on the good trajectory. And look at the Biscuit Framework, of course.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, we're all figuring this out, and I think that's exciting. And I think, there are opportunities from it. And I really am hopeful, hopeful that this is something that is ultimately going to be good for all of us, for our productivity, for our businesses, for, not being so beholden to writing in a weird stilted way that Google has forced everyone into.
That's the thing that really excites me. Everyone who works for me, almost everyone has written fiction or written non-fiction. Or I've written romantic novels. You may or may not be surprised to know, and it's always been troubling, and it's always been an sort of an ick to write things that don't read well. So we've never done it. And I dare say it has cost us, especially on our own website, on the SEO website, it has cost us some rankings, but just could not do that crap. Had to make it human, just couldn't do it. And I'm in a very privileged position, and we have to have deep conversations with clients. But God, if it's coming back to authenticity and reality, then hallelujah. Right, we need to wrap things up. So if somebody's listened to us for the last 22 minutes and they only have to remember one thing, what's the single takeaway you want people to have when they listen to this? If they could forget everything, what's the one message from Michael?
It's that I think they should, be aware search is changing, and this could have, they depend on search. This could have some really negative effects on their business, but that there's a lot of opportunity, and they should start to work and think about how they can take advantage of that.
So, thank you to Mike for getting involved. That was a great episode. It's lovely to hear someone actually talk sense and logic and this means this around AI, rather than just talking up the opportunities and making it sound like the big savior. But having spoken to Michael, I hope you will now get the sense that there is an opportunity here. A lot of change in SEO and digital marketing as a whole is about opportunity. We talked about lots of different things and we bounced around. But if you listened to or watched this podcast before, you'll know we like to talk about 3 things. So I'm going to go back over what those 3 things were, because I wrote them down. The first one to remember is that Google are the ones to watch. For now, at least, keep an eye on Google for now. Google are the biggest. For now. So keep an eye on Google. Number 2, the nature of search is changing. The way people search is changing. And number 3, opportunities. There are new things happening. There are new opportunities. Please check the link in the profile to the Biscuit Framework, which Michael talks about during the episode. And it's just a really good way of in a very practical way, making sure you're not going to lose out on any opportunities, and that you're as ready as you can be. And it's not full of waffle, which is nice. So there we go. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Michael will hopefully be returning with more practical, logical, actionable advice. Until then, I'd like you to click the subscribe button and click the little bell if you're on YouTube. And apart from that, I just want you to smile, because this is an exciting time. So there you go. My name's Andrew Laws. I'm the host of the Business Amplifier podcast. We remove the distortion from your marketing. Ooh.